Okay, I hope everyone got the notification that said recording in progress because we are in progress. So hello everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for attending the 2024 Innovative Instruction Showcase hosted by the Distance Learning Interest Group, the Instruction Interest Group, and the STEM Interest Group of the Academic Library Association of Ohio, ALAO for short, if you are not in the know. Now you are. Today's event will consist of 9 lightning talks presented in groups of 3. Presenters for each talk will have a maximum of 7 minutes. If you are still talking after 7 minutes, we will unfortunately have to cut you off because, as mentioned several times, we have a lot to get through and we want to make sure that we keep on time. We will have, after each group of 3 talks, we will have time for questions for that group. Please use the Q&A feature to submit your questions. You should have that as an option at the bottom of your Zoom screen. We cannot guarantee that questions asked in the chat will be seen and answered, so please make sure you use the Q&A function. The session is being recorded, so if you have to step away or want to revisit any of the presentations, you will be able to do so in the near future. We will also be adhering to the ALAO Code of Conduct today, which I don't know if I can throw into the chat, but we will be ensuring an inclusive and equitable and a respectful and an open environment. If at any point during today's session you feel uncomfortable or harassed, or you witness violations of the ALAO Code of Conduct, please visit the webpage, which if I can figure out how to share it in chat to everybody, I will. Please visit the webpage and submit a report using the contact information at the bottom of that page. And I think that's it for the housekeeping portion. Oh, thank you, Bree. Thank you. So let's go ahead and dive in. My name is Ginny Bain. Kristen Adams and I are the co-chairs of the STEM interest group, and we will be facilitating Group 1 presentations, which fall broadly under the theme of developing and supporting librarians as teachers. So first up on our schedule, we have Ryan Scott. And we're going to try to limit the amount of introductions that we do so you all can introduce yourselves in all of your glory. And we figured everyone's probably going to do some of that themselves anyway. So Ryan, you're up.
Okay, thank you. Can you hear me? Okay. Yeah, hello. My name is Ryan Scott. I'm a reference and instruction librarian at Columbus State. I've been a librarian at Columbus State for 20 years. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And I think, oops, sorry. Sorry about that. Okay. Well, can you guys see my screen?
We can see your screen,
Okay,
yes.
that's good. All right. Let's see why I won't start my slideshow. Okay, let's try this. Okay. Okay, I think it's doing what I'm supposed to. Okay, yeah. So, so like I said, I've been at Columbus State for about 20 years. Thank you to let's see, to ALAO and the organizers of this event, the co-chairs from the different IGs, and thanks to the audience. So, um, I I'm going to talk today about briefly about approaches to scheduling instruction sessions. And LibWizard from SpringShare has different tools that can be used to collect input from groups of users. And okay, let's try. Sorry. Okay. Um, sorry. And for us, forms are one of the LibWizard tools that we used, and we use them to create an instruction scheduling form where instructors can schedule library sessions. Uh, a link to the form is included in an instruction uh, uh, invitation email that is sent to the instructors each semester. Um, it's also posted on our website on a faculty support page. And faculty are not required to use the form. So the form in itself is an additional scheduling option for the faculty. There are options that we were able to put on the form that are they've always been available, but maybe the faculty don't necessarily know um, they're available, or they're not necessarily obvious. And some of those include things like multiple days and times for the instruction sessions, or alternate days and times. Also, multiple locations and duration are all options that on a form they're visible there. So again, they might not be kind of known or obvious to the instructors. Um, other considerations as far as opportunities include awareness engagement opportunities. And so um, with regard to that, a link in an email is easy enough to click. Uh, and the form serves, among other things, as a list of possibilities. Um, I mentioned some of those obvious options already, but then there's others that are maybe not so obvious. Um, different sources that we might explore in a session, things like ebooks or other source types, physical books, and then things we have quizzes like a Kahoot quiz that's an option for the instructors, and specific databases. Um, Other areas of opportunity, the flexible data. So with a form, and we get form submission data that's automatically put into an email and is also available in the system. Uh, and we can easily harvest that and use it elsewhere. Even if you have lib apps from SpringShare, you might have lib insight, but there's other tools out there that you could use. And the form is easy to update. So if we need to make changes, if there's things that we want to add, maybe there's new topics or things we want to cover, we can do that easily. Um, okay, for options, considerations, we have, like I said, we have access to lib apps. We looked at LibWizard, of course, but we also looked at LibCal a little bit. LibCal does have the technical ability to integrate with calendar systems, something like Outlook, so that um, once the form is submitted, you could potentially have it schedule the session. But that leads to the challenge. So because we d- we need to have coordinated human mediation. So when these sessions are scheduled, there's so many things potentially to consider that we need to have that. So we have staff of about a dozen librarians, approximately a dozen librarians that teach information literacy sessions. But depending on circumstances, there are other librarians that might be able to step in and teach as needed. Um, sorry. Um, but there, among the complications, we have variety of location possibilities. So two campuses, and we have more than that if you want to include the regional learning centers, high schools where we have college credit plus classes, online or in person, in the library classroom or in other classrooms on campus. Um, all those things kind of can combine to really make a need for human mediation. Um, so all the reference librarians have access to a shared email account And so when the form submission data comes in, it comes into that email account, and it can be looked at first come, the first available librarian. So that works. So our outcomes, since we created, tested, and implemented, there hasn't been a whole lot to worry about it. uh, To worry about. If they do come up, changes are easy to make if they're needed. We started in August of the past fall semester, I did a quick calculation. It looks like about 20% of our sessions since then have been scheduled through the forum. Um, so that's kind of where we're at in terms of the uptake of it. As far as growth, we've subsequently implemented a LibWizard survey. It's a different kind of tool, but yeah. And so that was in February, and we are about 31% of our instruction session faculty have responded to that. So overall, it's been useful and it's been encouraging engagement. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Ryan. I was just about to cut you off, so thank you. I'm glad I didn't have to. All right, next up we have Christine.
Christine, I can tell that you're unmuted, but I can't hear you.
No, we still cannot hear you, Christine. Would it be worth it to, oh, did I just hear someone? Nope, Christine, I'm so sorry. We cannot hear you. Should we try to move on to the next group? Possibly Christine, maybe if you leave the Zoom and come back in, we can come back to you at the end of this group. Okay. Okay, let's try that. If that is okay. I'm so sorry about that. Heidi.
All right, thank you. Can you hear? This is Mandy. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, Mandy, we can hear you okay.
Excellent. And screen sharing's okay?
We cannot see your screen at this point in time.
Try that again.
There we go. Yes.
There we go. All right, excellent. Thank you. Well, I am Mandy Shannon, and
I'm Heidi Gowder.
And we are both librarians in the Teaching, Research, and Engagement Division at University of Dayton Libraries. And we've all heard it, that this meeting could have been an email. And we think that this suggests that meetings are, by design and by necessity, unidirectional lists of updates and announcements that don't allow for much engagement. So our goal for the next 7 minutes is to provide an alternate way of thinking about meetings, because we use meetings in the instruction team at the University of Dayton Libraries to minimize duplicate work, have a better understanding of what our colleagues do in the classroom, and really to advance our pedagogy. So to understand the foundation of how this works, we need to provide a little bit of context for how the instruction team is set up. The UD libraries are organized with a combination of divisions or departments and teams. And to really overgeneralize, the divisions are administrative structures and the teams are based around functional work. The instruction team is chaired by Heidi, and it's composed of 2 subgroups. The Gen Ed team is primarily comprised of faculty in the teaching, research, and engagement, along with the special collections instruction librarian from the Marion Library. And this part of the team is responsible for designing and implementing instruction in the 100 and 200 level English composition courses and the 200 level interdisciplinary social sciences course. The cross-division team comprises the instructional librarians for all and liaisons for all disciplines, and who, as the name suggests, come from nearly every division in the libraries. So as a functional team, the focus of the instruction team meetings is always and only on instruction. Monthly meetings generally alternate between Gen Ed and the cross-divisional areas of focus. So members who don't teach Gen Ed courses don't need to attend the Gen Ed meetings. At the beginning of each academic year, the team establishes annual goals and a calendar of topics to cover in meetings. This includes standing items for discussion and identifying topics of interest for professional development.
As Mandy described, the team is large and includes folks from multiple disciplines. Professional development is one way we can easily focus on the shared work of instruction. When the cross-division team meets, professional development is baked into the agenda, usually about 20 to 30 minutes of the hour-long meeting. And if you could advance, Mandy. Here is a list of topics that we've covered in the last 3 years. Librarians are in charge of how they want to deliver the topic. We've had article discussions, lectures, Jamboard brainstorming, and active learning. For example, with the Finding, Using, and Citing Images session, the Visual Resources librarian and I provided a brief overview of fair use and Creative Commons. And then the librarians paired up to search for an image and create a citation for it. This was February's professional development topic, so we made it a little fun by asking folks to find a Valentine-themed image. Some sessions are so well done that we see potential for larger audiences. The Health Sciences librarian led the literature review session, and we have encouraged him to think about sharing this topic in venues to non-science librarians. The library is also considering an expansion of its Lunch and Learn programming to include library-wide professional development, and we plan to recommend some of these sessions for the future. Professional development with the Gen Ed team is less structured and tends to arise from discussion around common issues, including assessment, lesson planning, and databases. For example, a discussion about an English course with many sections led to an activity where we worked together to map out a typical library instruction session. I asked the team to work in pairs and share their approaches to lesson planning using a slightly longer version of the worksheet you see here. I did not expect everything to be completed in the allotted time. The point was for team members to learn from each other and hopefully use the worksheet as a template for future lesson planning. If you could advance, please. Our engagement and learning is not just limited to monthly meetings. We created a shared drive in 2017 that we call the Open Playbook, and it's where team members can post instruction-related materials for adaption and reuse. And it includes lesson outlines, worksheets, handouts, presentations, and more. The worksheet from the previous slide is in the lesson planning folder.
I'm not new to librarianship or instruction, but I am new to UD. And so from the perspective of a new employee, I can share that these meetings have been helpful for me in learning the history and approaches of library instruction at UD, but also for developing genuine collaboration and partnerships when I'm approaching a new space. I think often library instruction can feel very individualized, but these meetings, as a colleague shared in our meeting yesterday, can make it easier to collaborate by sharing wins and challenges. And it also grounds us in a perspective and foundation of being perpetual learners. So we do recognize that what works well here at UD doesn't necessarily translate to other institutions. We have administrative structures already in place for this. And with faculty status and the evaluation that goes with that, we also have institutional support for the time that goes into preparing these professional development presentations. We also recognize that we're a library with a large pool of instruction librarians to have generative conversations. So if you're in an organization with fewer people or less support for that approach, we still think that there are opportunities for casual lunch and learns with anyone in the library who's interested, and also for collaboration across institutions, as we've done with other librarians from 6 or 7 institutions in Southwest Ohio in the past. And so we've shared how we use engagement in our team meetings, and we look forward to learning more about how others use meetings effectively to enhance engagement and collaboration.
Thank you so much, and thank you for being flexible with your timing. Christine, let's see if we can get your mic to work.
Can you hear me now?
Yes,
I thought
beautiful.
so. Okay, excellent. Thank you all for your patience, and thank you all for coming up with a nice solution as we get this moving. So as I said before, or tried to, you all didn't hear me, but my name is Christine Mueller, and I work with Xavier University Library in Cincinnati, Ohio. I have been the instruction and reference librarian for about 5.5 years, but I have worked with Xavier for 20. So I'd like to share with you the outcome actually of a faculty learning community that I joined to explore UDL in the classroom. And I thought, well, I wonder if I can apply UDL to the library instruction context. And this evolved into a whole program. I ended up, it exploded into a full LibGuide. So I started with UDL. This turned into exploring inclusive pedagogies, and then literally exploded into a whole LibGuide because I thought, well, I can't just do UDL. Now I need to do culturally responsive teaching and critical information literacy. At some point, I think I'd like to look more into, and I have before, but more about other accessibility issues. More about maybe incorporating Jesuit values into this Ignatian pedagogy, as we call it. So, this is kind of, and also racial reconciliation and disruption. So there's a lot more I feel I can do, but here's where I'm at so far. What happened was I realized I then had inclusive pedagogies as a whole grouping, but that I needed to incorporate teaching theories and teaching techniques. So I get into a lot of the ACRL framework and lesson planning, including backward design, engaged learning techniques, which I believe work in tandem beautifully with inclusive pedagogies. You can't really engage all learners in a lovely, inclusive pedagogical way without having active learning engagement to engage all learners, neurodiversities, identities, educational attainment backgrounds, etc. Inclusive pedagogy does create inclusivity for all students. So UDL is often thought about as accessibility, but we're talking about disabilities, hidden disabilities. We're talking about all the range of identities that a student may have. We're considering divergent experiences of students. The goal is obviously to foster belonging, and not just that people feel a sense of belonging, that people do belong and are included and their voices are heard. I am a huge proponent that self-reflection on one's own experience is critical to having that empathy to engage and work with and understand your students. So I've mentioned UDL, CRT, and critical information literacy is where I'm at so far. Some things that one can do to incorporate UDL are maybe designing, and you should design all of your research materials with multiple formats of text, images, video, audio to engage all learners. Always alt text your video images, always caption your videos, and use engaged learning techniques. In short, you will all have access to this PowerPoint later, I believe. So I'm going to whip through it. Culturally responsive teaching does require preparation, including self-reflection. And I provided the librarians with a self-reflection worksheet. Also communication. How are you building rapport with your students? How are you communicating with them? What lingo are you using or not using to make sure students are with you and not going, what did she just say? Library lingo, what? So facilitation, also engaging students with active learning strategies and decentering yourself as the instructor. So critical information literacy teaching is much more tricky. We're talking about historical, cultural, social, and economic and political forces that interact with information. So ways that I incorporate this in a library instruction, even a one-shot, is inclusive search topics for my demos of, say, advanced searching, incorporating diverse subject databases, not just the obvious one, maybe for the course that I'm helping with. Awareness of inclusive subject headings. So we know that we've had to morph some of our old formal subject headings to be kinder and more inclusive. And then again, back to the reflection on yourself and your students. And, you know, and having those difficult conversations with students on what could be seen as controversial topics, getting into the hard meat and potatoes of things, which incorporates also classroom management and course expectations, right, for engagement. So what's happened is I have created several teacher training workshops as I've evolved with the librarians and for them into teaching moments as I improve their instructional role and inform their instructional role. So I did have a session in the fall on lesson planning using good instructional design. And that's all in this guide. I'll plop the link in at the end so you can see all what my take on it and the sources I've used so far. I did one on engaged learning techniques after taking an ALA active learning course last summer. I did do an accessibility for LibGuides session that I thought was very important to use those tools internal to a LibGuide itself to create an accessible LibGuide experience. I did a workshop specifically on culturally responsive teaching, where the students have a handout, which is in the LibGuide, to engage with self-reflection on your own cultural self prior to engaging with your students. And then I recently delivered the instructional pedagogies workshop to my librarians. So what's next is more workshops. So I would like to work with the librarians on actually incorporating inclusive pedagogies into their actual lesson plans and active learning techniques as well, and kind of spend some workshop time maybe through the summer with the librarians applying maybe just subject headings or alt text images, just maybe one nugget of good accessibility standards in LibGuides. So everyone's not overwhelmed and it's doable. Also, I offer individual consultations to my librarians, so I can help them incorporate good inclusive pedagogies, engaged learning techniques, using backwards design. I'll even write a lesson plan for them because I love it so much. My background is an educator, so with that old MED that I got when I was younger. So I've always been an educator at heart. So being an instruction librarian is a dream. So I love writing lesson plans for people and exploring more pedagogies. I also would like a workshop time on, you know, what have the librarians tried so far? What worked, what didn't? Let's reflect, let's edit, you know. So that is the LibGuide itself. Let me see, I would like to, I'm sorry, that is the PowerPoint. Can you all see the LibGuide now? Could somebody give me some indication that
We are still seeing the slides.
Still seeing the, all right, well, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to stop the share and go ahead and grab the actual webpage guide. Now you should be able to see my inclusive, yes, okay. So this is a whole, so like I said, this started with just inclusive pedagogies. It's one little page subtab right here. But what happened is it exploded into a whole guide covering, you know, teaching theories. And I made this nice chart just as I show people where they're at. So how students learn, and this incorporates the framework, of course, how we teach, including inclusive pedagogies and active learning, and then lesson planning and getting into all of that with the librarians. So, and then to show you, do I have time left?
We're going into the Q&A session. If you could put the link in the chat, I think everybody would appreciate
Okay,
that.
perfect. Done.
And
Okay,
we can
excellent.
move into the Q&A,
Okay, I
which
didn't
we'll do
see
for
your-
about 10
yeah.
minutes. Okay.
I didn't see the minute warning. Sorry about that.
Okay, that's okay.
All right, there you go.
I think we're doing okay on time. So we've got
Excellent.
about 10 minutes for Q&A. We only have one Q&A in there. So please, if you've got a question, put it in the Q&A so we can get it answered. And we plan to have a 5-minute break before we move on to group 2. So our first question is for Ryan, and it asks, Ryan, do you have a link to an example of the form you could share?
I do, and I will grab that and put it in the chat.
Wonderful, thank you.
Sure.
Okay, we have another question now. This one is for Christine. Do you have a good sense of what faculty think the faculty think of inclusive pedagogy approach?
This is for me? Yeah.
Yes,
I've had really good response so far. I've actually had the opportunity to test out some new lesson plans using engaged learning techniques and inclusive pedagogical approaches. And even some of that is expression and communication. You know, how are you delivering things to the students, presenting it to them? How are you speaking with the students? What sort of language are you using? How welcoming are you? You know, even soft skills. And I actually received a thank you card from a faculty member a couple weeks ago, loving my teaching style with the students. So I feel like it's been well received so far, but this is a small sampling as we're just getting this off the ground.
Wonderful. We don't have any pending questions, so here comes one.
I also got a direct message that I don't know if panelists can actually access the Q&A and ask them. So oversight, apologies. For Mandy and Heidi, are your open pedagogy folder materials openly available for perusal anywhere? The exercises and assessment materials sound great.
Right now it's set to private. It's just for folks on the instruction team. And thought about opening it up, to be honest. But perhaps that warrants further discussion.
Okay, excuse me. We've got 2 more questions in the Q&A now. Another one for Christine. Is there a way we can access the 226 Active Learning Techniques PDF from your guide? It seems you need an Xavier account to open it. Thank you.
Which exact guide?
226 Active Learning Techniques.
Oh, that's actually from Iowa State University. I'll bet if you Google that, you will find it. I think the link doesn't work because I initially had it in a Canvas course, which is internal to Xavier for the librarians, and I've transitioned things to library instruction for them. So I'll look into actually changing that out so it's accessible to all. So thanks for the alert on that, because I am sharing this guide widely. I just presented it at LOEX, and folks are already copying it. So feel free to harvest from it or copy it. So take what's useful to you in your context. But I'll look into that link, but it is something I hope is Googleable that you can grab those.
Wonderful, thank you. Let's see, there's another one. I'm wondering how many teaching librarians you have at the University of Dayton. I can't remember who was at Dayton.
That is Heidi and me.
Okay.
And so, so within teaching, research, and engagement, we have to like mentally count here. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 of us in tree. And then on the cross-divisional team, we are adding in, Heidi, do you have this number off the top of your head?
I'm going to go by the number of people who have access to the open playbook, which is 17, but that seems overly large. I'd say it's closer to 12 to 14.
Yeah.
And that includes, that includes folks like our archivists and folks in the Marion Library and archives, special collections people, and liaisons who just work with their departments. So it's a really interesting mix.
Okay, thank you. We have a clarification question for Christine. Was that guide available from Iowa State? Is that what you said?
No,
Or
the
you-
226 learning techniques, active learning techniques are from Iowa State University Center for Excellence in Learning and Teaching. And it's called 226 active learning techniques.
Okay.
I'm actually still trying to grapple with it to see if I can plop in a copy for you all. But
Christine, I just sent you a link. If you'll confirm that that's correct, I can drop it in the chat.
I don't see a link that was sent to me. By whom?
By me via chat. Oh, I might have dropped
Me.
it to the wrong person. Let me check on that real quick.
Me in this case is Bree McQueen. If you didn't see if you have a hard time seeing the screens.
Yeah, that's it. Perfect. Did you hear me?
Yes,
Yeah, that's the correct
I think Bree is
document.
busy
Awesome.
working on
Thank
the
you.
link. Okay,
Thank you,
Bree's got
Bree.
it in the chat.
Sorry,
Okay.
I didn't realize I was muted. Yes, I have it
That's
in
okay.
the chat
It's
now
okay.
for everyone.
Thank you for doing that. I was trying to work on that real quick and morph it, but thank you for grabbing that. Perfect.
Okay, we've got just a couple more minutes to wrap up the Q&A. There's one more that's come in, and then we plan to have a 5-minute break before group 2 starts. And this is for Mandy or anyone else. Are you aware of any active teaching librarian groups that someone might be able to join? I'm the only instruction librarian at my institution, and I'm always looking to make new connections.
Same here. So anybody have ideas? I'm an army of one as well.
Yeah, so I think this is where we didn't have much time to talk about it, but I briefly mentioned the idea of cross-institutional collaboration, and this is something that I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Heidi, you can correct me, Julie McDaniel at Sinclair started, gosh, it's probably been 5 years ago now at this point, and what it was is just a group of librarians, even those of us who were not in, one-person shops, getting together. And I think at that one, we had folks from Miami and Capital and Wittenberg and Sinclair Community College and UD and Wright State, possibly somewhere else, and just getting together to do kind of meeting with folks from other libraries, other universities to talk about, here are some of the techniques that have worked really successfully for me. It was a lot of fun to meet people in a less structured way than like a conference. We got to see other libraries, we got to learn other techniques and approaches, and I would encourage, as we all kind of head into the summertime, with the acknowledgement that this is when all those projects build up, it's also a good time to kind of have that refresh. And I believe that here in Southwest Ohio, Julie has actually kind of started the call for this again. So I would say look for colleagues at other institutions in your geographic area and see if that's an option. And I will just second the love for Julie.
Okay. Well, thank you, everyone. I think that wraps up the Q&A. I don't see any more in the Q&A box here, so we will have a 5-minute break and come back at 2:45 Eastern time for group number 2. Thank you again.
Yes, thank you so much, everybody. Yeah, it is. I built in just a little bit of padding time just in case we ran a little bit over. So it's a bit longer than 5 minutes, but we will reconvene at 2:45. I'm going to pause the recording. Please help me remember to restart it.
The theme for the next part of the lineup today is fostering student engagement. My name is Jacqueline Sprates. So I'll be introducing the presenters in group 2, and Bree McQueen will handle the Q&A. So thank you so much to the presenters for sharing your knowledge, and we're going to go ahead and start with Olivia and Erin.
All right, thank you. So as introduced, my name is Olivia Hobbs. I'm a research and engagement librarian at Case Western Reserve University.
And I'm Erin Smith. I'm the instruction and outreach librarian at Case Western.
And today we are going to be talking about teaching a semester-long information literacy course. So for some background about the 2 credit-bearing courses that we taught this past semester, both were writing and research intensive courses that were under the general education program. We had pretty small class sizes of 15 and 17 students respectively, and it was in a seminar format. So we had a lot of discussion and activity-based learning. The topics of our courses were focused on digital internet-based communication, with my class being specifically about misinformation on social media and Erin's class being about online communities. We really encouraged our students to use library resources both independently for their readings and their own research. The assigned readings, which I'm putting in quotes because for both classes, they were pretty diverse in format, ranging from popular media articles from the New York Times or Slate to podcast episodes, YouTube videos, blog posts, and of course, social media posts.
So as Olivia mentioned, our course texts, we tried to keep them to open access materials or something that libraries own so that our students they weren't required to have textbooks, since we know that can often be a burden for students. With my course, Knowledge in the Digital World, historical context of internet communities was very important in the modern applications, so social media, as Olivia mentioned. But then we drew in a lot from scholarly communications regarding copyright, open access, and digital equity was a major focus of the class. Who are the information brokers of library resources or other resources, algorithmic content, our Google overlords. And then the students were particularly interested in AI topics. Everything was scaffolded, so assignments were very carefully designed with backwards design by Wiggins and McTeague. Yes.
And I similarly scaffolded my instruction. So we started with a very general introduction to what misinformation is, some definitions, what research is being done currently. And then we got into more specific topics like the psychology behind misinformation, ethical policies of media outlets and social media platforms, digital citizenship, fact-checking practices. And then it culminated in applying all of that knowledge to specific events such as the anti-vaccine movement, the 2020 election, and January 6th. I also emphasized throughout the semester the importance of reading, evaluating, and analyzing information in different formats as my students completed their weekly readings, in-class activities, and then their own research projects. Most of the writing instruction did focus on synthesizing information from different sources to provide support for their own reasoning and how to integrate that evaluation and background into their own writing. One of the most fruitful topics of discussion in my class was the responsibility of the government, different platforms, and then individuals in terms of disseminating misinformation, and they all use logical reasoning and evidence for their very different opinions.
And we both used careful usage of rubrics, grading rubrics for equity and clarity, so that students knew how to get the most points possible in any given assignment, really what their expectations were. We also devoted ourselves to qualitative assessment using the I like and I wish assessment formats at midterms so that it didn't just rely on the end of the semester post-class evaluations. And we also worked with sometimes scholarly discourse. So as I'll mention in the next slide, scholarship is conversation. And oh, thank you, Olivia. Yes, scholarship is conversation. So how did we incorporate the ACRL framework? In my course, we reiterated that scholarship is not produced in a vacuum. So course readings built on and constantly referred to foundational internet scholarship like Howard Rheingold's Virtual Community. And then the class would continually reference those early readings so that students would see this coffee shop of ideas and scholars kind of idea where they wander into the coffee shop and plunk themselves down and then start taking part in whatever that conversation is. Information as value, we looked at the perils of citation and citation formats, and I really tried to emphasize the value of citations Digital equity, as I mentioned, was hugely important to the class. And then research's inquiry with open-ended exploration of topics, and that research is an iterative process.
And I similarly use the ACRL framework in my course, same as Erin, research's inquiry. In my case, I really encouraged my students to follow their genuine curiosity for both their research topics and our class discussion based on the readings, and following those threads of interest to learn more. It also came up during fact-checking exercises or while we were debunking misinformation that we saw online, because we realized that finding answers will inevitably lead to or introduce new questions and new things to discover. We also talked about searching as strategic exploration. So when considering different research questions, when will the library provide good answers? When will Google be the place to be? And in terms of social media, what does Twitter provide that's different from TikTok? How are those two platforms discussing different topics differently? You also have to consider related keywords, terms, and themes, which I know we all think about in terms of synonyms, different search strategies, but also in terms of specific communities. How are different communities and platforms talking about these ideas differently? And how do you know that to find it and be able to search? And then we also focused on authority as constructed and contextual when we talked about evaluating information and sources. So we tried to stay away from the language of good and bad sources, instead focusing on the nuance of each source and how they can be useful or valuable in different ways throughout your research. And a lot of this discussion was about biases, which can be both positive and negative, but which everybody has, which is a good lesson for the college students to learn, but one that they find difficult to grasp. So that concludes our presentation. Thank you, and happy to answer any questions at the end of this.
Great, thank you so much. So we're going to move on to Diane's presentation next.
Okay, hi, I'm Diane Kolosionek from Cleveland State, and this is Make 'em Laugh, or at least Smile, Using Humor in Library Instruction. Classroom humor has benefits like putting students at ease and contributing to a positive learning environment. Using humor can make library instruction more enjoyable for teaching librarians who deliver many one-shot sessions every semester. Get out of your comfort zone and have some fun. Librarians have different personalities and teaching styles, and varying levels of comfort and confidence with presenting to an audience. Personal definitions of humor vary. What people find funny is subjective. Librarians don't have to become stand-up comics in the classroom, but they can use humor in library instruction to establish rapport with students, promote student engagement, and reduce students' library anxiety. Here are 3 articles from the library literature that serve as a good introduction to the topic. More research is needed to study the impact of humor in library instruction, particularly on student learning. Walker gives practical advice, including a sequence of steps to help librarians get more comfortable using humor in the classroom, starting with smiling and being lighthearted, and gradually moving to encouraging student involvement. Walker recommends avoiding humor that is culture specific, since international students may find it difficult to understand. He also suggests topics of humor be universal, like student life, exams, computer problems, or mega hit movies like Star Wars. Azadbakhsh conducted a narrative review of the literature to compare librarians' use of humor with that of health sciences instructors. The review sought to gain a better understanding of humor's use and impact as a teaching and learning strategy. The author discussed the benefits of humor in the classroom. Knowing one's audience is key since humor is contextual. She also shared many examples from the literature. These included using silly search terms, funny item titles, and false drops, which are searches that retrieve unrelated or unwanted results when demonstrating databases and online catalogs, as well as using costumes, props, and media like music, video clips, and cartoons during library instruction sessions. I use props in the classroom, like a toolbox from Toys R Us when talking about the library research process. I also use my magic 8-ball. I ask it a question in an energetic way before I start my session. Are we ready to have some fun? The answer, without a doubt. Librarians were surveyed for their attitudes toward classroom humor in a study by Perrette with 55 total respondents. Almost all respondents in this study said they utilized humor in library instruction sessions and that it was appropriate to do so. Respondents were also asked open-ended questions, which provided useful results. Perceived benefits of using humor during library instruction identified by respondents included learners more likely to listen, make connection with librarian, relaxed learning environment, and more fun for the librarian. Perceived drawbacks of using humor in library instruction included off-putting, offensive, perceived to be out of touch, credibility undermined, not professional behavior. Types of humor viewed as appropriate during library instruction by respondents included relevant, self-deprecating, funny sources, topics, also pop culture and memes. Types of humor viewed as inappropriate during library instruction included belittling of an individual or group, offensive, racy, bawdy, also inappropriate, too sarcastic, slapstick, gross out. Here are some of my ideas for adding humor to library instruction. Use relatable or funny research topics that appeal to college students, like sleep, social media, or smartphones. Brainstorming keywords can be a fun exercise too. A simple way to insert humor is to search for books with funny titles related to the course or assignment in an online catalog. Show the book cover for added effect. During library instruction for a sociology class, I could demonstrate a search for books with titles like How to Cook Husbands and Everything I Know About Women I Learned from My Tractor. Gallows humor is often used in medical education. A book like Stiff, The Curious Lives of Human Cadavers might be funny to a certain audience. There's quite a bit of gross humor in juvenile literature, like the book titled Does It Fart? With the subject heading of flatulence. Would this be a funny book to use during instruction with pre-service teachers? Maybe, maybe not. Not everyone will find everything funny. Don't take it personally if an attempt at humor falls flat. We often teach students how to find the full text of an article by title. This is a place to add humor. Authors sometimes use funny or provocative titles to increase the chances of getting their publication cited by others. You can find allusions to pop culture in the scholarly literature, like You Probably Think This Paper's About You, or Fantastic Yeasts and Where to Find Them. There's medical marijuana. Can't we all just get a bong? How about Friends with Benefits on the positive consequences of pet ownership? And an article title that I think is hilarious, but one that might be too risky to use in the classroom. Chemical processes in the deep interior of Uranus. When planning instruction, consider your relationship with the faculty member in the audience. Where's the line when it comes to humor, especially in a professional setting? And my favorite, memes. I use memes during my instruction sessions, like this 2-button meme, pay for an article or use ILL. There's Bad Luck Brian, who gets into trouble by not citing his sources. Grumpy Cat, librarian shushed you. You probably deserved it. Use popular culture as an icebreaker. A quick audience poll before class begins, like Barbie versus Oppenheimer. And finally, the meme that gets the most laughs, me waiting for Diane's presentation to end. Thank you.
Thank you, Diane. That was great. So now we're going to move on to the third presentation of this group, and that's Mark and Erin.
Okay, hi everyone. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Okay,
I can
thank
see
you.
it. Yep.
All right. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today for our lightning talk, which is simply entitled Let's Map It, Empowering Students and Engaging Faculty Through Frames-Oriented Concept Mapping. My name is Mark Eddy. and I'm a research services librarian at Kelvin Smith Library at Case Western Reserve University.
And I'm Erin Smith, Instruction and Outreach Librarian at Case Western.
And there we go. I'm having a little bit of trouble with my slides. Okay.
Okay.
Erin, take it away.
Yeah, thank you. So why concept maps? And we'll get into what we mean by concept maps in a moment. So concept maps teach students to generate and explain keyword selection, organize the information and topic discourse that they find while brainstorming. These are the two key factors of concept maps, the generating keywords for us and the organizing of the information and evaluating the breadth of a brainstormed topic. Okay, we also are internalizing those ACRL frame concepts with information creation as a process, searching as strategic exploration, and research as inquiry when we're working with concept mapping. And then they hold utility and direct applicability to information literacy instruction activities. So it's really a great way to reach out to students and to have them participating in active learning in classrooms. So this is what a concept map looks like in STEM. So hopefully you can see that it has a topic that is kind of branching out with different arrows and ideas. And often STEM maps can be very hierarchical. Yes, if no, if yes. But what we're working with is a little more open-ended, a little more on the artistic, humanities, social sciences kind of bent to things. Okay.
So yes, Erin and I have experimented with a number of different ways of using concepts maps in our information literacy activities. And so we're going to share a few of those with you now. Erin likes to use in-session mapping exercises that involve students collaborating on or making their own maps. And I like to use a concept mapping to describe how to keep track of research lines of inquiry as my social science students search for information with library resources. And I also show them some pre-made slides of how to do it.
Okay, so here are a couple, because I was the research librarian for English, history, and modern languages and women's and gender studies before I became instruction and outreach librarian. Here are a couple examples of those. And if you can see that the topic is in the center, so we have for the critical analysis of social media one for a linguistics course, Twitter is in the middle box, and then ideas just spin out from there as students make connections between different ideas. Same with the women's history and studies, where we had a course on World War II and women. So we had World War II and nurses, and then they put sources. Where did they find the sources? What were some keyword ideas? So it was something that they could work with as they were actively researching, before they were researching, as they were actively researching, and then again to make a new map at the end if they would like. So again, the benefits are that this significantly enhances in-class keyword brainstorming to give them a chance to put pen on paper. Highly effective in engaging students and instructors. Instructors tend to love this exercise, and it also facilitates that instructor-librarian collaboration because they really enjoy seeing how their students take to it, and then sometimes will incorporate it into their own classes. So, and map in action in the faculty classroom in the next slide would be, this is something that Dr. Kara Byrne for her children's literature course. After we did concept mapping in class, she started doing it in my library session. She started doing it in her own classroom, and just the students just absolutely explode the board with ideas and keywords and thoughts related to each other. So this cognitively is really tapping into things in an interesting way.
So I often use concept mapping in my research methods psychology undergraduate class when I go and visit them and do exercises. And what it does, what it helps with oftentimes is to help them deal with the sheer breadth of possible topics for psychology research. And that breadth and depth of research can be a little overwhelming. So it's nice to have something that they can do that is very accessible to help them kind of wrangle all of that diversity in research inquiry. It also helps them sort of map what they're doing as they look for literature in databases and other resources. They can begin to map the different research lines and keep track of how different research areas developed and how they intersect with one another. So the idea is to, initially through brainstorming or through looking at the literature, to identify a set of interests that they have or a set of research areas in a broad topic that they're interested in exploring further. And once they choose a specific area, then they can kind of, outline that and begin to kind of explore the database, the article literature, and begin to kind of trace out the lines of which research communities are involved with a particular area of research, what questions they're asking, and what more specifically has to do with that research line. And as they do this, they can go back after maybe they've done some concept mapping with their information source investigations and revisit the original question. And oftentimes they can, they're able to kind of revise that or change that based on what they find. And as we know, sometimes students have to do this. They start out with one question and they end up through their investigation of the literature asking a different question. And so this allows them to have a visual exercise to do that. And then they can revise their question and then go more deeply into the research community that is dealing with or is addressing something related to that question. So here's an example of a slide I like to show in class. This is a research question that has to do with the connections between health status, socioeconomic status, and any disabilities or challenges a person might face in relation to their educational attainment or performance. And as we trace out these research lines, we can develop each of them individually. We can, if we know something about it, we've done background reading, we can begin to look at the different research questions or factors, influencing factors that are associated with each of those research lines. And in this slide, I sort of highlight the health aspect, and the focus becomes, after some searching, access to health services and how that affects people's overall health and how that in turn affects their educational development and performance. And then as we go into the database literature and look at the article literature a little bit more and do our literature review, we can begin to see what kinds of factors the researchers have looked at in terms of what influences access. And it can be things like the social stigma associated with seeking out health services. And that may have to do in turn with all things having to do with the community itself, whether the culture or whether it's, sometimes there are big differences between the way men and women access healthcare in a particular community. So there might be a gender parsing of the research for that. And we can continue on down and look at that further. And this particular slide kind of shows you that iterative process for both of the kinds of concept mapping that Erin and I have been talking about. So you can start with having students brainstorm their topic and map it out with a concept map with a particular question, and then go into looking through the resources and developing their sense of what the research literature is on a particular topic, or, maybe it's a book and they can trace the different arguments in a particular book or document if it's a different area of research, and then use that to revise or change their question and continue to do that a few times until they have a really well scoped out research topic or question that they can manage, say, in a 10 to 15 page paper that they may be working on.
All right, so we have some references for you all that you can take a look at afterwards. And thank you so much for listening to us. And we welcome any questions at all.
Awesome. Well, while we wait for more questions, I did get some questions from panelists who apparently can't use the Q&A feature. So I will read those out now. We're going to start with one for Diane. So have you encountered challenges with students whose native language is not English and or who bring different cultural expectations and experiences to the learning environment?
Well, I have one that I can recall. I was providing instruction for a first year writing class, and I didn't realize that most of the students were international students. And prior to my session, I had prepared examples about the Super Bowl because it was that time of year. So I can, I'm all excited to, show them how to search and, ask questions about the Super Bowl. And I think most of them didn't understand. So I guess I just learned, of course, you can, say, well, it's like soccer, or what are the big sporting events in your home country? But that took me aback. So just a lesson for me to communicate better with the instructor, the faculty member in advance to get a better idea of the makeup of the students in their class. That answers your question, but that's the one that comes to mind.
Awesome, thank you. The next question was for Erin and Olivia, and it was, what level of interest did students have in this course? Did you have a lot of signups? Did they seem excited about the topic, or was this more like a required course?
They are required to do some communication intensive courses in my case, and SAGE's courses in our writing program in Olivia's case, but they were very engaged with the topics, I think because they saw them as being very applicable to their lives. So I had been capped at 17 and had 17 students, but then a couple had to drop out for other various reasons. So, but I think Olivia had a full class of 17.
I did, and there was some movement at the beginning of the semester, but at the beginning of the semester, I did ask them, what made you choose this course out of all of the other writing ones? And the common answer was, this fit into my schedule. This works with my daily whatever, which is understandable. But at the end of the semester, as evaluations are rolling in, I'm hearing from a lot of students that they really enjoyed the topics of misinformation, social media, getting to apply things that they were seeing in their daily lives to an academic research setting. So even if they weren't originally super interested, I think we did get there.
Awesome, thank you. All right, so there is one in the Q&A. Mark and Erin, are most of your instruction sessions one-shots? I love concept mapping, but with the one-shots, often feel like I don't have enough time to teach it.
Yeah, I teach, sometimes I teach 2 sessions with faculty, but mostly one-shots. And then I just leave, I like to, because keyword searching is so important for the first and second years that I'm working with, then I really just keep 5 minutes to be able to explain what a map is with a faculty member, give an example that the faculty member leads to kind of break the ice, and then students do their own. But sometimes they're at a point in the topic where they really haven't cogitated too much on their research topic. So they'll feel badly that their maps don't have a lot on them. And then you just explain every map is different. This is an iterative process, and then they get the ball rolling. But yeah, I really try to schedule the time in there and tie it into keyword selection and scholarship as conversation. But I know it's really hard with the one shot. It's true.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, sometimes if I'm not able to work it in, I at least mention and describe how it works. And I've had some instances where instructors will actually assign their students to do a concept map and turn it in so that they can get a sense of, do they understand the practice of doing it? The other thing that I do have is I have, as part of one of our instruction modules, which is sort of self-paced and online, I take them to a page that explains concept mapping, and there's a great little video that I have just absolutely killed with the links to it over the years. I think it's really good. It's from the UCLA Libraries system, and it is a short 2-minute video on concept mapping and how to do it. I use it all the time. I think it's one of the best. So one of the things I want to try to experiment with is getting students to do it either before or after a one-shot, if that's the venue. Yes.
Awesome. So the follow-up to that question was, thanks. I really like the idea of tying it more directly to keywords. There is also an additional question for you all that came through from a panelist. And that was, what is your opinion of the tools that facilitate the mapping process? So AI or otherwise?
Ooh, that's a really good question. Yeah, I think that's something that we'll really have to take into consideration and that I want to take into consideration since we've all been across the instruction and library world kind of not faced with faced with some challenges and faced with some enthusiasm in some cases with AI from faculty and students and staff. Yeah, I'll be curious to see how I can utilize our own Copilot AI platform at CASE to see, I mean, this is giving me a lot of ideas, so I really appreciate this question. I haven't delved into it yet, of course, but now you're really making me want to.
I would agree. And actually, that's something that I'm really excited about too, is using AI to experiment with how to get students to generate these maps using a tool like that. For right now, it's mainly just, I like the accessibility of pencil and paper. I like the idea of saying you don't need a software application. You don't need to know a lot of stuff. You can just start drawing. So that's where I am now, but I know that there are going to be tools out there that will be really fun to use for this, and I'll be excited to see that. If you know of any, please let me know.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, we have one more question, and this one is for Olivia and Erin. Were there any tense moments with the topics you chose? Vaccine, January 6th, etc.
No, and that was actually one of my biggest concerns. This was my first semester teaching. I knew that there would be some touchy subjects of politics, things like that. But I got really lucky with my students this semester. They were all very respectful. When they did disagree, it was usually about larger concepts, like I said, what role the government or platforms or individuals should play without any arguments. And there were definitely people who expressed their opinions one way or another in regards to politics, but everybody was very clear that it was a safe, comfortable environment. So I don't know how much of that is them versus me versus just where we are, but I got very lucky.
Yeah, I had only one tense moment throughout the semester, and that was when one student expressed their concern about TikTok and censorship in relation to China. And one of my students who is from China then expressed his feelings about Israel-Palestine and the US response to it, to protest. So we had a tense moment, but it was one of those things where I have tried to set boundaries from the very first day of these are going to be some polarizing topics that we talk about with race and gender and algorithms and international affairs and whatnot. So they respected that when I brought that up, and we just kind of were prepared to discuss after class, but then they both went their separate ways. And yeah, so there can be tense moments, but I think that if you set expectations of discourse at the beginning of the semester, that really helps. And then the students can feel free to express their ideas and bond with each other over that. But then you're prepared for those tense moments, if there are any.
Awesome, thank you. Well, that takes us to the end of our Q&A session. So we are going to do another little break, let people stretch their legs, get prepared for the next set of speeches, and we will return at 3:25 with group 3 presentations.
The theme around this session is tools for research and teaching, and we will be starting with Graeme States.
I'd help if I unmuted myself. Can you hear my screen now? Can you see my screen and hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, technical difficulties, I suppose. Anyway, hello, thank you, everybody. I am Graeme States. They even let an Indiana librarian come in and join you for a little while. I am the Learning Outreach Librarian and Assistant Professor of Library Science at Anderson University in Indiana, which is just about 40 miles northeast of Annapolis. Today, we're going to talk about material research, the idea of material culture. The title of today's session will be The Value of Material Research, a charge for instruction librarians to embrace material culture instruction. So to begin, let's define this idea of material culture and how does it relate to the idea of research? Material culture, as defined by Marcy Dennis, is the in-depth study of the materials of human cultures, of anything for how it reflects and constructs the culture for which it is a part. I know that's a mouthful. Really what that is saying is material culture is this idea of looking at the object as opposed to the source behind the object, looking at the object itself. That's what we're looking at. We're looking at the object. And so we don't really care what the object is saying or meaning. We're looking at the object as a whole in its research. There are multiple benefits with researching this way. The first and maybe perhaps the most simple one is it is a more equitable history, or a more equitable story, at least to discover. You're beginning at an object, not an event, a person. So all of the pre-understandings we'll talk about in a little bit are all gone, and you're looking at it just from an object. It's also a unique path to a research question. You begin this at the micro level. So instead of having somebody begin a research from picking out keywords what they're interested in, you give them an object, or they give you an object, and you begin your research at a micro level. How does that object fit into culture and society? And then finally, there is some research that I've been digging into a little bit that says that teaching information literacy through primary sources actually can improve the information literacy comprehension. So back in early March, I had an instructor at Eddy University come to me and say that he wanted to do something with Bibles and hermeneutics for his biblical hermeneutics class. Hermeneutics as a whole is the study of the principles of interpretation, both in theory and methodology. He was doing this for a biblical hermeneutics course. You can see here on the one side of the screen here, on the right-hand side, some of the Bibles that we actually used. With our friend Marvin Harrison back there in Indianapolis Colts, you know, he's in the background there too. But you can see the Bibles that we used. We gave all the students a 4-question worksheet. In the 4-question worksheet, the first 2 of the questions were focusing on the physical makeup of the Bible. We had them pretend like they did not know the language the Bible was written in. And we had them just hold the Bible in their hands, analyze it. We had them, you know, answer questions of it being big, of it being small. We had them answer questions of, does it have pictures? Does it not have pictures? Does it have a lot of words, a little words? Is there a lot of white space? We had them kind of explore the object. By taking away the preconceived notions of the Bible and the idea, then we brought them into the second question, which is now you have this object that you've explored, that you've held, you've looked at. Now let's take this idea and let's bring in research methods. And let's try to find out the how and the why the object may have been used. So we looked into some databases and other things, but what we were doing with this was we had them begin to research around the object itself, not necessarily around the text of the object. What this left us was a couple of results, a couple of observations. I mean, unfortunately, it's too soon for concrete data, but here's what the anecdotal observations show. The students researched from a more open perspective. They almost forgot how controversial that the Bible and the object can be because they were researching from a more open perspective, trying to reach how they can understand the object, and then taking their research methods in from there. They saw the benefits of reaching a research question through material culture. Part of research is pre-understanding. That's a big idea of information literacy, is the pre-understanding of an object or a source or a database or whatever. And so what we did is we had them remove or get rid of their pre-understandings of the object, and we had them research differently, maybe in a way they would not have researched before. And that can help in with pre-understandings. And when you're doing information literacy instruction through databases or catalog or stuff like that, people tend to go to a commentary they're comfortable with, or go to a particular author or the particular people that they want to read. This take throws it all out the window of pre-understanding and brings them to the research question at the micro level and brings them out of the pre-understanding and maybe opens their eyes to more research that might be available around an object or around a topic they may have not realized before. It also requires students to learn new techniques of discovery, most notably through primary sources, but also it's a little bit difficult to research an object. You're going to a lot of museum websites, you're going to a lot of digital archives, you're going to a lot of those places to research objects. You're not necessarily researching through Atlas or something, which is also very helpful for them to learn new techniques of discovery. And then finally, it gives students a perspective on how to evaluate sources. What it does is it allows students to evaluate sources in a way that allows them, that gives the source relevance to their topic. You're not evaluating the source like in the CRAP test, but you're evaluating the source with relevance to your topic and your idea. So coming across these articles or these research they do with these objects, the articles they're finding they're evaluating not based on if the article is scholarly, but they're evaluating based on, does the article help answer their research question? And so all of this, all said and done, instills a critical thinking and evaluating sources into information literacy, which I believe is a very core component of information literacy instruction. I'm happy to answer questions and more. I know I zoomed through that really quick after in a Q&A session.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. So next we have Gerald Natal's session.
Hello, everyone. Let me share my screen. There. Okay, I'll turn my. Okay, so thank you for attending my presentation, Incorporating AI in a World Religions course. My name is Gerald Natal, and I am the Health and Human Services Librarian here at the University of Toledo. So you might be wondering how I ended up actually in a world religions class talking about artificial intelligence. Since ChatGPT has burst onto the scene, I put in a lot of time attending workshops and videos and webinars, anything I could get my hands on to increase my knowledge about it. But also I wanted to pass that knowledge on to my colleagues here and more broadly across the university population. For that purpose, I created a library guide, and it's starting to pay off a little bit. I recently received a request from the provost's office to participate in a discussion group that's setting up a series of individual task forces to develop university policies on a number of identified artificial intelligence areas across campus. So when a member of the religious studies faculty reached out to the library and was inquiring about having a librarian come and talk to her class about AI for this specific assignment, our library dean contacted me, and he thought I was the logical choice. Prior to this, I really only mentioned AI in my classes in passing. So I thought this was a really fantastic opportunity. I invited the library liaison to the religious studies program to join me in this. And then I set off to make my lesson plan. The request was for a very short presentation to instruct students on how to use an artificial intelligence tool. The assignment had to deal with 5 selected world religions. They were going to gather some information about those religions, and then there was going to be a panel discussion held at the end. And so this was going to inform their participation in the discussions. Oops. There we go. I was asked to recommend some tools and discuss how to construct a prompt and then conduct some searches, and also talk a little bit about evaluating the results of their searches. So I started thinking about maybe a logical plan. I thought maybe I would talk about how generative AI fits into the research process, particularly where they were in their class. Recommend those search engines, and then talk about the pros and cons of AI, and go over prompting and evaluation eventually. So specifically, I wanted to talk about these things that I thought were very important. The fact that these AI tools are really hard to decipher, how they work. There's all that inherent bias, but I wanted to specifically make sure that they were savvy about ethics and copyright. And the university had recently released a statement on the use of AI in the classroom and for research. So I wanted to make sure that they had a pretty solid idea of those issues. I chose these three particular tools. These were the three most popular ones at the time, and they were being developed so rapidly that the names of these things were changing even as I was putting together my session. And then I gave them these particular tips here for creating a prompt. It just so happened that the CLEAR framework, which is Lowe's framework, did a really good job of breaking this down for them. So I focused on this particular framework in my session. Okay, so I took an informal survey of the class, and I discovered that none of these students had had any sort of library instruction, which could be a good thing or it could be a bad thing. So I had planned for that a little bit, and I decided to do some Boolean searching first so that they would have a point of reference with the prompt searching. I started by demonstrating this particular strategy here and explained that this works really well in the research databases to the library. And also you can get a more precise search if you did something like this in a web search. But I did contrast it with the more natural language example here. And then after that, I used the prompt in this slide to search in the three selected areas. Based on the results, it turned out that the Bing was the best, the Copilot was the best example, because it did point to the references, sources, or at least didn't give citations, but it did point to references. So we decided that would be the best one to use. And then, of course, I had to talk about evaluation. So I told them they needed to make sure that these results were relevant to their particular assignments, and make sure they were credible sources, and consider the bias and perspective. And to that point, to that end, I didn't have a lot of time to go over them, but I did talk about the SIFT test, if you're familiar with that, and of course, a modified CRAP test that they could use to help make these decisions. So what did I learn from all this? I only had 30 minutes to deliver the 3 sessions, so obviously that was a big one. I did tell students to bring their laptops, and I would have supplied them if they needed them, but they really didn't have enough time to do any hands-on learning, I don't think. I didn't do any sort of evaluation for similar reasons, but all of my sessions are followed up at the end of the semester with a survey to the instructors so that we can gauge the effectiveness of the instructions. And I didn't have the time that I really wanted to dive into the concepts like I should have, but I did put heavy emphasis on my library guide to get the students to become more self-educated about the pros and cons of the tools. So on the plus side, I got to practice teaching with AI. And I did cover all the instructors' objectives, albeit I was in a rush. And thanks to the forward thinking of the instructor, those students got an early introduction to AI. And they got some residual instruction too on library information literacy, Boolean and databases. And then finally, I think it was nice that librarians are recognized as teaching partners on campus. I think it also demonstrates that the library can add value, as teachers learning, and that of course contributes to retention and graduation. That is really what our administration is interested in. How's the library dealing with that stuff? It just, I think, improves the status of the library on campus as partners in that enterprise. And I don't know where I'm at exactly. Time.
Yep, we are at time. So thank you so much, and get started with the next session. So the next session is Maureen Berry, Rachel Atchison, and Rebecca Stanwyck. And that will be the last session for the day. And then after that, we'll have a Q&A.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Maureen Berry, and I'm joined by my colleagues Rachel Atchison and Rebecca Stanwyck. All of us use she, her pronouns, and we make up the team that provides instruction for first-year writing courses at Bowling Green State University. In an effort to infuse more information literacy concepts and balance out database mechanics in the research workshops we provide, we decided to incorporate the information literacy reflection tool created by educators and librarians in Oregon. Full disclosure, the creators of the tool have much bigger plans than we have time to tell you about. Today, we'll just focus on how we've used the ILRT as a pedagogical tool. The creators describe the tool as a metacognitive self-assessment instrument that prompts students to reflect on their own approaches to information use and foundational information literacy concepts. There are groups of curated statements for each of the 6 frames. We have found that the tool can 1, help set the tone at the beginning of class, and 2, initiate meaningful discussion in some cases, depending on the group. As I like to say, it plants a seed. With some workshops lasting just 50 minutes, we use the survey tool for just one of the frames, research as inquiry. This frame matches with one of our goals for the research workshop, which is that students will approach research as an open-ended exploration. The tool can be administered on paper or online. On the left, you see the PDF developed by the creators, and on the right is a Google form version that you can copy. Some statements on the research as inquiry survey include, I learn best when I'm interested in the topic and want to know more, and I ask myself periodically if I'm considering multiple perspectives during research. Rachel will now explain how she uses the reflection tool.
So in my teaching, I try to make a really conscious effort to accommodate a wider variety of learning and processing styles. I know that I personally, as a student who was a little more introverted, always really longed for ways that I could engage with the material and also demonstrate to the instructor that I was engaged with the material without me having to speak in class. I know some students can also struggle with making that quick mental transition between activity periods, so I tend to use this reflection tool as a means to accomplish both of those things simultaneously right at the beginning of class. I start off with the first exercise that you see on this LibGuide page. I set a timer. I ask them to brainstorm individually what they think the phrase research as inquiry means. And then we jump straight into the research as inquiry reflection tool. And then we circle back as a sort of group-wide discussion and combine both of these exercises. So now the discussion portion, I make it clear, is optional. Some classes are chattier, and people really do feel like they have something to say at this point. I've had students tell me both that the reflection tool really challenged them to think about aspects of research that they hadn't considered in the first exercise. And I've also had students tell me that it more or less just confirmed and solidified their initial instinct. But then obviously some classes are much quieter, and that's also okay. With those, I tend to wait a while and then ask if someone can just define the word inquiry itself. Like, what does it mean to inquire about something? And then I say something about how we all kind of know instinctively that research is about asking questions about whatever you're trying to learn more about. but that it's also good to ask yourself questions about how you're going about the process of trying to find answers and whether or not there are ways you can do that more effectively. So basically echoing back to them what the reflection tool just prompted them to think about. But regardless of which direction the discussion portion goes, they will have had several heavily engaged hands-on minutes to encounter and process these concepts on their own. And then if they do feel like speaking up, they basically just wrote themselves a script with which to do it. Like their own thoughts are right there in front of them, which hopefully makes that a little bit less scary. Because even as professional instructors, we do that right. For example, I am reading to all of you off of a script right now. Even if they don't speak up though, my observation has been that at this point, they're usually very clearly focused and paying attention and really ready to see where all this library stuff is going to take us next. So now I will pass this to my colleague Rebecca, and she will tell you about how she uses the tool.
So when we first decided to incorporate the tool, I was doing things very similar to Rachel, but it felt inauthentic to me. My teaching is based in feminist pedagogy, and as such, I like to incorporate lots of peer learning and community building. All of my classes are done with students working in groups for keyword exploration and database instruction. So I begin by introducing the tool via the idea of research as inquiry, and then I distribute to each group the research as inquiry statements, asking them to pick one statement that they, as a group, want to work with as the class goes on. I then ask them to discuss and reflect as a group for a couple minutes what they think that statement means to them. How does it connect with what they're going to be doing or what they think we're going to be doing, and to their research process as they know it. And I do ask them to write this down for later contemplation. We then go about the business of the rest of the class doing workshop time, usually the last 15 or 20 minutes of class, depending on how much time I have. I go table by table, asking them, helping them with individual questions that they had come up during database exploration. But I'm also asking them as a group to reflect again on their statement that they chose. What do they now think of the statement? Did it change any ideas? Allowing them to do this in groups, I feel, gets them, one, talking to each other and sharing their research, which often helps them to narrow research questions. But it also lets them learn from each other about the different ways to thinking about research. Not all students have the same background, and allowing them to talk to each other, discuss keywords and research concepts as they're going, framed by one of these statements, allows for differences to be explored and commonality to form in small but impactful ways. So here's a link to the tool. You can also use this QR code to find it. I think Maureen is also going to drop the link in the chat. We also have our emails on this next page. If you have individual questions, please feel free to reach out to one of us on these emails, but also ask any questions you have in the Q&A portion. So we thank you for listening. We know we kind of flew through that kind of fast.
Great, thank you so much. Now I'll turn it over to Beati for the Q&A.
Thank you, Mira, and thank you to our panelists in the group 3 and to all of the panelists today. These were phenomenal presentations. I really enjoyed all of them. I do not currently see any questions in the Q&A, so we can just hang out for a minute and wait. I also don't see anything in the chat. So we'll just politely smile. I think we're all processing, right? Like there was so much that we got in the past 2 hours that was that we're all writing notes and going back and researching some more. Thank you, Maureen, for putting that link in the chat to the reflection tool. Any questions for group 3 presenters? Or for any presenters? I suppose we can open that up. We have a comment from Kristen, no questions, but a lot of new ideas. Yes, I second that. Andy says, very inspiring and helpful. All right, Ginny, maybe I'll turn it back to you as the MC.
Okay, sounds great. I just wanted to say thank you again so much, especially to our panelists, our presenters, our Lightning Talk presenters for joining us today and sharing all of your amazing work. And also to our attendees for taking the time out of your day. I know these days it's a stretch to find even 1 hour free, so I'm very amazed and impressed that everyone, or most everyone, really was able to fit a 2-hour session into your day. So thank you so much for joining us. We will make the recording available in some fashion. My hope is that it will be available on the ALAO YouTube page, and we will send that out once that is set up. If for some reason we can't get that sorted out, then we will find another way and make sure that everyone gets the recording and is able to share it around. So if we can get a virtual round of applause for everyone, thank you again so much. And I hope everyone has a fantastic end of the semester, end of the quarter, if you are on a quarter system. And Bree, if you had a question?
Yeah,
Comment?
not really a question, more a comment to close it. I just want to remind our panelists that if you felt like this was a rushed amount of time, we are soliciting people to write for the instruction newsletter. So we're starting a Substack about instructions. So we would love to have you all submit something should you want to, no pressure, but that is also open to more than just the people who presented today. So if there's something interesting that you think you want to share with the group about instruction and stuff like that, please feel free to reach out to myself or Jacqueline. We're on the instruction interest group, and we'd be happy to talk with you about getting something in our Substack.
Yes, thank you for that reminder. I had completely forgotten about that. Yes, open invitation. Please submit your amazing work, because we all deserve a lot more credit for the wonderful things that we are doing, don't we? All right. Okay, well, I think that wraps up today's session. So have a great rest of your day, everybody.
Thank you all very much. Thanks for